Welcome back. As President Trump toured storm-ravaged parts of Florida, more political storms continue to brew in Washington. Let's bring our political panel in this morning. Political analyst Susan McGrath, Barry Edwards, of course, and Chip Merlin. Welcome to the program this morning. Thanks for being here, you guys. Let's go ahead and start with North Korea this morning. It's an issue that is on a whole lot of people's minds. You know, another missile launch on Friday. The president continuing to mention military options every chance he gets. So my question to you, let's start with you, Susan, this morning. Where is this crisis headed?
Well, so we're in a bit of a box, right? The United States has very few options. The best thing we could probably do is increase our sanctions because, you know, because of Kim, we don't want to get into a nuclear war, so it's a difficult situation.
That's the thing. Let me move down to Chip. Do you think that there's a possibility of a nuclear war here? We don't know what we're dealing with President Kim Jong-un.
Well, the military has to respond to it, and certainly the military is responding to it. We're actually making all kinds of new technology. We're having mid-boost defense technology. We're using X-rays and microwaves to hopefully blow up a nuclear missile that would come at us. So the military option has got to be explored, and the military is certainly getting ready for it because you can't have a dictator just making threats the way he is.
And Barry, we've seen two of these missiles already go over Washington. What's your take on this?
I think that it's bombast meets bombast. The president of Korea, or North Korea, and President Trump both like to hyperbolize a lot, and it's raised the rhetoric. But China, which is the most important player in this other than the United States, said that they would not defend North Korea if they preemptively attacked.
Why isn't China doing something more? A lot of people are wondering that.
Well, I think they are. They've agreed to the sanctions, and 80% of the petroleum and energy for North Korea comes from China, and they've agreed to sanctions. So I think that they are, and they're just doing it in a graduated sense. They don't want first of all, China does not want North Korea wiped off the map, because that means South Korea would be a unified country and be on their border. So I think that it's in China's interest, and I think the president hopefully realizes that and will tone down the rhetoric.
All right, Susan, let's talk about the president cozying up with the Democrats this week on issues like the debt ceiling, DACA, then the Dreamers. Is this just a strategic turn for him, or just more of that unpredictability that some would say he has, some would say?
Yeah, I don't know that Donald Trump has a strategy outlined. I think it's more unpredictability. But for Democrats, it's good for us because what's happening is it's dividing Republicans, and that's going to be good for policy, and it's also going to be good in the 2018 elections.
Is it dividing Republicans?
Yeah, well, it's certainly the leadership of the Republican Party is upset when the debt ceiling proposal by the Democrats comes out and Paul Ryan says it's ridiculous, and within the hour the president accepts it. It certainly gets the leadership that way. But the core Republican who voted for Donald Trump is very happy to see this because they are tired of the gridlock, and a deal has to be made, and the president made a deal.
Well, Republicans or even his base fall in line, though, if he's negotiating directly with top Democrats.
I think they have to. I think if we are to move the country along, and I think the president has said this, that we do have to seek some type of unity between both parties, and that's what he's doing, whether Republicans like it or not. And what's their choice? They can't go anywhere else. The president is a Republican president. He is their president.
There is no choice?
I think there is no choice. I think Trump ran as a deal maker, and when he couldn't get the deal with the Republicans, he went to the next best option, and that was the Democrats. And Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi have become good partners. They've partnered on the debt ceiling, they partnered on the aid to Herman, and they partnered on the DACA and on the border security. And there's no reason why they can't continue to partner. Chuck Schumer in the open mic said, he likes me. And remember, Donald Trump is not a traditional Republican. He probably is a New York Democrat. And his personality is closer to Chuck Schumer's and Nancy Pelosi's than Paul Ryan, a Midwesterner, any day of the week.
A New York Democrat.
A New York Democrat.
It's very interesting. You know, I have a question. When leaving Florida, the president was asked about the protests that were happening in Charlottesville, going back to his theory that he said both sides were to blame, stating that more people believe that he is right. So the question is, why can't the president let this go? I got to have 10 seconds for each of you because I have one more important question. Why can't the president let it go, Susan?
Because he can't separate himself from his base. During his campaign, he couldn't refute the endorsement by David Duke. He said, well, I don't really know much about him, so he can't separate himself from his
Barry.
base.
I think it's simpler than that. He doesn't like to be wrong.
Okay, and Chip.
I agree with Barry. It's the president's ego. He can't, once he says something, he will never back away from it.
All right, real quick, and I'm going to ask Susan and Barry this. What do you expect from the president when he attends the UN the first time this week?
That's a tough one. He could call on the other nations to oppose North Korea, or he could revert back to the America First mentality that he often has and throw a bone to the national groups around the country.
10 seconds, Barry.
I think this is really important for him. This happens every year. The presidents go and give a speech. I think he's going to show that we're not unilateralists and try to start building a coalition.
All right. Thank you for being here this morning. You guys really appreciate it. We're going to have to leave things there. So many questions. Barry Edwards, Chip Merlin, Susan McGrath. Thanks for joining us this morning, of course.